We will call to order our regular meeting of council and start by just appreciating that we are gathering today on the unceded territories of the Sishat and Hupachesit First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to be added to the agenda from councillors?
I'm so excited to add something.
Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor.
It's a little bath on my table here. Madam Mayor, I just want to ask a question about the RCMP and the wage increase in that.
Absolutely. We will put that on as new business. That works, unless we could put it, you could ask that in the financial plan.
Madam Mayor, is there, I'm just going to leave the room to go get a paper towel, okay?
Absolutely, thanks. Any other items to add to the agenda from councillors? Seeing none, any items from staff to add?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, 2 items for Council's consideration. One being item JD under Correspondence for Information and title Facade Improvement Program, and item M1, which is consideration of a license to occupy. And apologies, you do not have any documentation on the Facade Improvement Program. It's simply to remind the community of the looming deadline, which is April 22nd. That is correct.
Okay, with those amendments, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
Move approval with
Moved by Councillor Poon,
amendments.
seconded by Councillor Washington. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and now that we've approved our agenda, thank you. Let's not start a fire here. I think I will just quickly, before we go to minutes, let the community know that we just officially received publicly approval of our $2.5 million for the Key to Key grant project. So that was just announced by the provincial government. Thanks for the excitement at the back of the room. We do have now minutes, so we have special minutes from, or special meetings from the minutes from the special meeting held at March 23rd, 2022 at 5 p.m., March 25th, 2022 at 3:30 p.m., special meeting held at 9:30 a.m., and regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on March 28th, 2022, and special meeting held April 4th, 2022 at 9:30 a.m.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. Are there any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We will now move to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council. Would any members of the public like to speak today? Come on forward, Joseph.
I was going to maybe leave this till later and just bring it up after the meeting, but at the end of it, sorry, my name's Joseph. I live here in Port Alberni. And just a question, I noticed in the newspaper and from previous meetings the regards to the proposed development on Bird on 4835. I think it's on today's agenda also. I noticed in the newspaper, it looks like there was no public input on that one. I think that's what it stated, so nobody showed up for that special meeting by the sounds of it. And also it stated in there in the article in the newspaper that it's proposed for 40 units. It didn't specify, it said bachelor and 1 bedroom. I think for previous meetings it was 30, I believe I'm correct on that, 30 bachelor and 10 1 bedroom. And I think that's the case. The paper didn't kind of distinguish that, just said 40 units, so it could be half and half, 1 bedroom, half didn't state. I think that's kind of an important one. Just a question on that. I know we would like diversity and inclusion in our community with development and whatnot. No objections to the development. The only thing is with 30 of those being designated bachelor, I'm not sure that's creating the sort of community where you get families and a mixture of people living together in the same building. And so that's just a concern, because you don't want a kind of a one-sided sort of outlook on things. It certainly will hopefully bring the cost down, because their bachelor will be cheaper than a 1 bedroom. It's not a, we know it's not a, what's the word, low-cost housing. It's not that. It said there'll be small units, so they'll be charging less. So that's kind of how that fits into that category, I think. And I've lived in my own past, I've lived in studios, bachelor suites. It wasn't sort of the thing I would want to stay in long term. It sort of created a transient sort of thing happening. So just a consideration on that. I think the vote for the public meeting was regarding rezoning for it.
Scott, sorry, one second.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yes.
the public hearing is concluded on that application. Council cannot consider further input on that
Okay.
application. I'm sorry to interrupt,
Okay.
and I know you're just but you're
Yeah.
providing additional information to
Okay.
council on a bylaw that the public hearing has been concluded on.
Right.
Council is considering it for third reading.
Yes.
They can consider it, but they cannot take further
Okay.
input, I'm afraid.
So, I don't know if this is question period or not. So the thought was, though, I thought that was just for the rezoning, not for the actual approval of the development. Is that correct?
Well, but you're providing, so council has an application to amend the OCP and zoning bylaw in front of them. The public hearing in regards to that
Yep.
has concluded. So council cannot
Okay.
receive further input on
Okay.
that, I'm afraid.
Sounds good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. I misunderstood because I thought it was just for the changes regarding approval for a multifamily development for some changes on the lot. So I'm not trying to feed to anything, just I thought that's all that was for the public input, not necessarily the overall development and approval on what was put out. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I misunderstood that. Thank you.
Okay, we have no delegations today, so we'll move on to unfinished business. Item number 1, we have the 5-year financial plan Q&A summary. We've got that provided for us in the agenda, and Councillor Solda, if you wanted to ask a question about the RCMP budget, now would be a great time for that.
I do. We know that, I think it's from 2017, their contract was open, and retroactive pay. Do we have the money for it? Because communities are really being hit hard, so the news has reported. So I'm just kind of curious to know what our status is. I know we were putting money away. Is it enough?
Madam Mayor, that's a good question. So right now, we've been giving estimates from the RCMP. They haven't solidified that number yet, but we have been putting money away in our emergency reserve for that. And that is correct, Councillor Solda. The retro pay goes back to 2017, so it's 2017 through to 2021.
So our reserves are fine, and will they be depleted with the RCMP? Will we pay out 32 members? Because some members have left.
Yeah. I think we'd
Does that work?
probably be best to get a report on this.
So,
There's a
okay.
lot of information. Myself, Scott, and Andrew did meet with Inspector Rochette a week or so ago about this. There's some options being put forward to municipalities, and then, as we know as well, FCM and UBCM are both advocating for some changes in how that will be financed. So there's a few things that I think we don't know yet. Andrew, if you could just answer, do we have enough in our RCMP reserve? Or if you want to bring information back, that is fine.
Well,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, we have it's approximately $1.2 million in that range that they estimate for the RCMP retro pay component. We have $2 million in our emergency reserve, but we do have monies going in from this year that will supplement that to build that up again, along with the community, or the public safety building, is also coming out of that fund. So we are utilizing quite a bit of that reserve, but we should have enough to cover that. But obviously with a report coming forward to council that will give the information as far as the details on what could be done as far as a payment plan, or maybe there's funding coming from senior levels of government. We don't know that yet, so rather than provide information that's incomplete, we're waiting that information from senior levels of government to provide the details to understand what the implications are for the
I
city.
would love to know if the senior governments are also going to include the cameras that we're going to eventually have to have too, because, I mean, that's going to be a very expensive venture too. Okay, looking forward to the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the Q&A? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed under line 92 about the liability about line painting and sidewalks and stuff, the answer box is still blank.
There will be a future staff report coming forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Andrew, for the summary. Okay, we'll move on to staff reports, and item number 1 is accounts.
Thank you, Madam
Councillor
Mayor.
Washington.
I move the certification of Director of Finance dated April 11th, 2022 be received and checks numbering 150281 to 150349 inclusive and payments of accounts totaling $840,645.11 be approved.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item number 2 from our acting CAO and Director of Development Services, we have Building Inspector Resource Sharing Agreement. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So the city and the ACRD have had building inspector sharing agreements in the past to provide coverage for each organization. We started that in 2011. The last agreement did expire in 2019. The city's recruitment process for our second building inspector continues, and the city had requested that the ACRD provide some limited building inspection coverage. The ACRD has determined that they are able to provide that service. This agreement would be for a 5-year term with a 1-year term renewal. It covers both jurisdictions, although within the ACRD, the city would only cover the valley. We wouldn't go out to the west coast. And it does, where able to, each organization does provide a building inspector when the other organization may need it. It assumes we assume each jurisdiction assumes all risks and liability, and it's a cost recovery system based on time that's put in. It's worked well in the past for both organizations, and it's being, this agreement's already been renewed by the ACRD, and it's in front of you for the cities, for your consideration, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And I think this is so important given right now, you know, the level of building applications that we are seeing. It is just incredible to me that we are getting by as best we can with one building inspector. So certainly wherever we can provide support, I think it's so incredibly important, and hopefully we'll be able to find a second building inspector in the very near future. Are there any comments on this? Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question. I know that the fire departments have the mutual aid agreement. Are there any other resource sharing agreements that we have with the regional district? And is there, if there isn't, has there been any thought about other potential positions that could be shared between the two organizations?
I can't think of too many other staff sharing ones, although the city does have engaged the ACRD to provide an emergency management thing. So there are a few ones like that. The city provides water to the Beaver Creek service area under an agreement. So there are instances on a few items where we have done that, and there's no reason why potentially, where it makes sense, the two organizations couldn't examine that further.
Thank you. And I think another big one, of course, that we're working toward is you know, a new service potentially valley-wide around the pool and aquatic center and what that might look like. So a lot of conversations going on, and certainly areas where we overlap and it makes sense to share services. Other comments or questions? Okay, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council for the City of Port Alberni authorize the Mayor and Corporate Officer to enter into the Building Inspector Resource Sharing Agreement with Alberni Clayoquot Regional District for a 5-year term effective March 24th, 2022 and expiring March 31st, 2027.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to bylaws, item number 1, City of Port Alberni 2022 to 2026 Financial Plan, bylaw number 5045, 2022 for final adoption. Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So today we're bringing forward the report for council to consider and approve adoption of the financial plan. We started obviously back in January. We started reviewing the plan at an overview of what's going on, and then we've had different meetings throughout the last few months that all were associated with the financial plan. For council, if there are amendments after this plan, they would not be any tax implications associated with those amendments, but we often do that throughout the year where we see fit or where we need to do projects that are either within the financial plan or if they are additional projects that council has deemed necessary to undertake in the current year. With the financial plan, the year-over-year increase for the average residential home is 3.81%. When we presented back on March 21st, it was slightly different, but we've received the revised rolls. So that's the revised rolls from BC Assessment that provides all the current assessed values. So those went down slightly in the residential market, and that's why the residential single-family home went down slightly. But it was at 3.9 when we presented back on March 21st. Now it's at 3.8. So an average increase of about $80 for an average single-family residential home. Now that council is considering financial plan adoption, we have the ability to set the tax rates, and that is to follow if council concurs with the recommendation today. So council does have the opportunity to take another meeting if they so choose. You still have time to do that, and we'd have to amend the schedule, and we wouldn't proceed with the tax rate bylaw, but today we're asking for council to support the recommendation to approve and adopt the financial plan for 2022-2026.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Near the bottom of the report, it looks like streets and sewers and stuff. We've put in the word repurpose. Are we awaiting future to mate them with other projects, or I just don't understand the word repurpose in this context?
Sorry, in the bottom of
Bottom of page 47.
47?
47 on the top of page 48. It just says Beaver Creek Road widening Pineo to Compton and repurpose.
Thank you. So with that, those are funds that are available for other projects, so they go into the reserves. They won't be expended, so they were sitting there as reserve funds right now. But the work that was planned for that road obviously started in 2016, so it's been sitting there. But we'll just, those funds will be sitting there ready for additional projects in the future.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the City of Port Alberni 2022-2026 Financial Plan Bylaw Number 5045 2022 be now finally adopted, signed by the Mayor and Corporate Officer, and numbered 5045.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item number 2 is the City of Port Alberni Tax Rate Bylaw Number 5053 2022.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So on March 21st, staff brought forward some rebalancing of the tax shares within the tax classes for the assessed roll. At that time, council indicated support for the format that was provided. Obviously, we've seen some amendments to the revised roll, as I mentioned in the prior report. With that, we now look at the tax share as presented in the bylaw today. So property taxation is the most important source of municipal revenue. It is a significant component of the revenue for the City of Port Alberni and most municipalities of our size. The tax rates that are used are based on the assessed values that BC Assessment provides. Council does not have the authority to set specific tax rates for specific properties. It's all within the classes that we set the tax rate for. And there, of course, there's the 9 classes that we have. But also, we do collect taxes for other local governments, including the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District, the Hospital District, and Vancouver Island Regional Library. We also have the school taxes for the province within our tax notice, and we also have Municipal Finance Authority and the BC Assessment Authority. So with that, council has the ability to provide 3 readings today, so they so choose. It is recommended that council continue into future years. As we've seen in this past year, quite a shift in the balances within the property classes, and at that time, council can consider resetting tax rates every year. Noting that over the past 5 years, from 2016 to 2021, as council requested, that we look at a comparison over some of the like municipalities on the island. And if we look at the city of Port Alberni, it is one of the lowest year over year or 5-year increased, sorry, I'll back up a bit. But over that 5-year period, the city of Port Alberni saw the lowest tax increase on the municipalities that were reviewed. And when I looked at the entire island, there's very few that were under, and they were very small communities: Alert Bay, Port McNeill, Port Alice. So, you know, looking at our increases, they are the lowest on the island since 2016. That is not the only metric that we should look at. Obviously, these other municipalities have growth that they're seeing that might increase those tax balances. There's asset management plans that may have in place to address some of their deficits. So I think it's important that you know, the information that we bring to council is more fulsome and does not just reflect this, but this is an indicator that council can consider when we move forward as far as additional increases in future years. So with that, when we look at the property tax splits, we see an increase in residential because of the non-market change. We've shifted some of those values from other classes. The same with utilities. There's a small increase there, but we've rebalanced those based on the direction or the indication that council gave, or the committee of the whole, sorry, at the March 21st meeting. So with that, the financial plan is reflective in the tax rates. It's what's required for the financial plan to be balanced, and if there's any questions that council might have, I can address those today.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
Not a question, but a comment. I just want to thank Andrew for putting together that chart showing the tax rate increases for the different communities throughout the island. And speaking as a councillor, it's really difficult to try and balance those wants of your community versus the needs of the community versus rate increases. So I think we've been very successful in striking that balance and also keeping our tax increases as low as possible. So thank you for bringing that forward, to showing the public that we've worked really hard the last 5 years to do that balance.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the first motion?
Thank you. I'd like to move that the City of Port Alberni tax rates bylaw number 5053, 2022 be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Paulson. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried.
I'd like to move that City of Port Alberni tax rates bylaw number 5053, 2022 be read a second time.
Second again, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried.
I'd like to move that City of Port Alberni tax rates bylaw number 5053, 2022 be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Seeing no comments still, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. And we'll move on to item number 3 from the Development Planner, Proposed Official Community Plan, Bylaw and Zoning Bylaw Amendments for 4835 and 4825 Bird Street, as well as 3618 and 3614 Fifth Avenue. Welcome.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. So for your consideration today is the OSP and zoning bylaw amendments at 4835, 4825 Bird Street, and 3614 and 3618 Fifth Avenue. Here's an air photo of the area at the corner of 5th and Bird. You can see the 4 properties with the laneway between them, which are the subject of this application. And a picture of the concept that's been included from the applicant. And to quickly summarize the application, there is the OCP land use map amendment they're applying for the 2 properties to the south at 4835 and 4825 Bird Street, as well as a zoning bylaw map and text amendments to create a new comprehensive development zone for all 4 properties that would facilitate this development, as well as an additional zoning bylaw text amendment that would add a definition for residential rental tenure to the zoning bylaw. There was a public hearing held for this application on March 29th. There were no attendees at the meeting. And during the meeting, staff provided some clarification between this application and another one that has yet to come to council, but caused a little bit of confusion. And council also did receive some correspondence expressing opposition to the creation of a comprehensive development zone for this project. Staff's recommendation is that the official community plan amendment be read for a third time, and that the zoning bylaw amendment be read for a third time, and that the zoning bylaw text amendment also be read for a third time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Poon.
Thank you. Really excited about this development, and I hope to see more of these in the future. Hopefully the new OCP will reflect some of the needs and desires of our community going forward.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, Councillor Poon, would you like to read the first motion?
Yes. I'll move that official community plan amendment number 36, Fifth Avenue and Bird Street, Carneado, bylaw number 5042 be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
I'll move that zoning text amendment number T30, CD3, comprehensive development, multifamily residential infill, Fifth Avenue and Bird Street, bylaw number 5043, be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
I'll move that zoning map amendment number 47, Fifth Avenue and Bird Street, Carneado, bylaw number 5044, be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
I'll move that as part of the development process, the applicant be required to complete the following before council considers final adoption of bylaw numbers 5042, 5043, 5044. Consolidate the subject properties into 2 parcels on either side of the laneway. And secondly, submit an estimate in the amount required for the completion of off-site works as determined by the city's engineering department.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no final comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4 from the development planner, we have proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 5249 Pineo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so for your consideration as well is an application for that zoning bylaw amendment at 5249 Pineo Road from the applicant, Peter Hammer. So the intent with this application is that they're requesting to rezone a portion of the property at 5249 from RR2 semi-rural residential to R2 1 and 2 family residential. And the intent behind this application is that rezoning just this portion of the property would enable a subdivision which would create 2 additional lots. And this would enable the construction of a duplex building on each of those lots. Here's a map of the property. You can see to the south, you see the property has frontage off Pineo Road, but that it also has frontage off Forest Road toward the rear. And the portion being rezoned would front onto Forest Road. And you can see outlined with the dashed lines, the 2 lots that if the rezoning is successful, would be subject to a subdivision review. Here's an air photo of the property. It just shows again the portion of the property that they're proposing to rezone, as well as a portion of the property to the north by Forest Road, which actually at subdivision they would be required to dedicate as roadway. And here's a picture of the building footprints that the applicant is proposing on those 2 lots they propose to create. If the rezoning is successful, you'd have these 2 duplex buildings on the property. In terms of the official community plan land use, the property is currently designated residential, which already aligns with their proposal for duplexes. However, the property is also located in a tsunami hazard area. And what this means is in the OCP is if you're within this area, you're required to follow the city's floodplain bylaw. And the floodplain bylaw sets out minimum construction elevation for habitable spaces, meaning the habitable space of these duplexes would have to be of a certain, above a certain geodetic elevation. In terms of the zoning bylaw, like I say, the property is already zoned semi-rural residential. There are a lot of semi-rural residentials around this property. As you go further to the east, it's all zoned for single-family homes, and then there's a few properties scattered around that are zoned for 1 and 2 family residential, which the applicant is requesting. And directly to the west, there's a property zoned RM2. However, I believe there is a restrictive covenant on the property that limits the number of dwellings. So it's not an RM2 zone as we would think, where you would have apartment buildings and that kind of thing. But to sum this up, the R2 zone is compatible with the surrounding lands, and the duplexes they're proposing are also just a low density use that is generally compatible with the area. Here's a map of the floodplain as the city has designated in the floodplain bylaw, and I've put a little yellow dot near the location of this property. So you can see that it's firmly within the floodplain area. In terms of infrastructure access and servicing, there'll be a number of requirements to even allow construction in this area safely. There'd be a number of required utility improvements, water, sewer, storm services, as well as a new access would be required off Forest Road. And at subdivision, a portion of that frontage, as I mentioned, would likely be required dedicated as roadway. And the engineering department has provided a number of conditions. They need a geotechnical report from the applicant, a stormwater management plan, a site grading plan, and then a design and estimate for those off-site works. To sum this up, approval would rezone a portion of this property from RR2 to R2, would enable a subdivision of 2 additional lots. This would enable the creation of 2 new duplexes, and this low density construction staff consider to be compatible with the area. The property, however, the property is within that floodplain and that tsunami hazard area designated in the OCP, but they would be required to build according to that floodplain bylaw and its construction requirements. So staff's recommendation is that the zoning map amendment be introduced and read for a first time, and that the map amendment also be read for a second time. Staff are also recommending that the applicant complete the following before council considers final adoption. They must provide a geotechnical report, stormwater management plan, site grading plan, design and estimate for required off-site works, and also receive a subdivision preliminary layout review letter from the city's approving officer. And staff are also recommending that the zoning map amendment be advanced to a public hearing on Wednesday, May 11th at 6 p.m. at City Hall. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's start with questions from council. Councillor Poon.
Just a comment. Glad to see this sort of infill development come proposed. Hopefully we'll see more of this rather than further urban sprawl. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson, and then Councillor Washington.
Just for clarity, and just don't know if this will create any headaches for the developer, but on page 135 of the agenda, there's an overhead picture and there's a shop abutting right onto the property lines. Do you foresee that that may cause any grief for the owner moving forward, or?
So, Madam Mayor, so
you should know about it sooner than later.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The applicant will be required to ensure when they subdivide the property that auxiliary building is far enough away from the property lines. I'd have to double check, but I believe it's already far enough from that lot line that we would require. Yeah.
Your little dotted yellow line.
Yes.
Those dotted yellow lines are
That's
not
correct.
always exact. No, thank you. Great question. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the report, it states that the gentleman would be responsible for his water lines. Would he also be responsible for the storm and sewer drainage lines, or is that a responsibility of the city?
No, I understand that Before final adoption, if council provides that, they will be required to actually design all the storm water and sewer services that they'll require for the property. And they will be required for everything on their property. And the engineering department has also specified that may be required to do some in off-site as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Scott, did you want to add to that?
I would just wanted to be super clear. So the developer is responsible for all costs in order to receive a subdivision.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, Councillor Paulson, would you read?
I would move that that zoning map amendment number 50, 5249 Pineal Road, Hammer, bylaw number 5049 be now introduced and read a first time.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, none opposed?
I'd move that zoning map amendment number 50, 5249 Pineal Road, Hammer, bylaw number 5049 be read a second time.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed?
And I'd like to move that as part of the development process for 5249 Pineal Road, the applicant be required to complete the following before council considers final adoption of bylaw number 5049. 1, geotechnical report. 2, stormwater management plan. 3, site grading plan. 4, design and estimate for required off-site works. And 5, receive a subdivision preliminary layout review letter from the city's approving officer.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments on this piece? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. None opposed?
And D, that zoning map amendment number 50, 5249 Pineal Road, Hammer, bylaw number 5049, be advanced to a public hearing on Wednesday, May the 11th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in City Hall Council Chambers.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. None opposed? Okay, moving on to correspondence for action. We have one item today, and that is a letter dated March 28th, 2022 from the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation requesting council's support in their selection of the 2022 community donation. Twyla, did you want to speak to this at all?
Sure. This just falls in line with the bylaw amendment that council authorized, where it gives the Community Forest Board the ability to assign their annual $10,000 in funding. So this amount is for 2022.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It gives me great privilege to announce that the council supports the recommendations from the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation to provide a donation to the Alberni Clayoquot Continuing Care Society Fir Park Village Eco Village in the amount of $10,000 towards the purchase of a new bus.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And we have one proclamation today. So an email dated March 29th, 2022 for Walk for Values on behalf of the steering committee requesting that council proclaim April 24th, 2022 as Human Values Day in Port Alberni. Councillor Solda, would you like to read that one?
Madam Mayor, I'll move that the council proclaim April 24th, 2022 as Human Values Day in Port Alberni.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And correspondence for information. Twyla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with the amendment earlier, there's 4 items for council's consideration. Correspondence from Arden Schiller regarding the request to have a tree replanted stemming from a tree that was removed when construction took place. 2 letters from a Mr. Home and a Mr. Jones regarding the 6th Avenue upgrades. We have a communication from Mr. Jerry Walerius regarding the water meter replacement program, in particular the history and then the status of the project and program to date. And the addition, the facade improvement program, just a friendly reminder to the community to please apply before the deadline of April 22nd, and that's through Community Futures.
Thank you. Are there items councillors would like to speak to? Councillor Paulson.
I'd like to pull up the correspondence from Frank Holm and Bob Jones with regards to 6th Avenue upgrades, if I could please. There's a couple things that I'd like to address. In one of the letters, it states that none of the residents was consulted, nor is there any support for this project among the residents, save for one, a city councillor. Well, I'm the only city councillor that lives on that street. I would like to say that I don't know who this gentleman is. I have never met this gentleman, nor have I ever had a chat with this gentleman with regards, and for him to assume to be speaking on my behalf is an error. We've talked about street works and the new way we're gonna have to look at doing streets over the next 20 to 50 years. And I'm sure that there are many residents that will have a lot to say about the new way of doing business over the next 20 to 50 years. And our streets, the paving will be narrower in order to get us to where we need to be with our infrastructure renewal. I'm totally in favor of this project. I understand the sewer and the water replacement. But I would hope that these letters would be forwarded to our engineering department, possibly reaching out to Mr. Holm, who I believe is kind of a bit of a spokesperson on my block, and maybe help allay some of the fears that he may have and maybe some clarification. There's many items in his letter that he addresses, and probably have to decide if they are in fact going to happen in that way, or if there may be some modifications there. So, and I'm a little bit disappointed, I just have to say, and a little bit hurt. There is a petition attached to this. My door wasn't knocked on, and I'm hurt. I thought that I knew my neighbors fairly well, and my door is always open, and not once has my door been knocked on, or not once has my phone rang. So, but that invitation is still there. I could have helped maybe facilitate some discussion with the engineering department. Thank you for my little rant, but I don't like people speaking on my behalf either.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson, and it is unfortunate when you know, a project like this that is needed and has been in the plan for so long. I don't think anyone could visit your street and suggest it doesn't need improvements, but it has been in the plans for a long time. To suggest you know, any indication that it is to do with a councillor is disappointing and frustrating. And that said, I do think that your comments around the new way of rebuilding streets are really important, and this is something that has been a strategic initiative of council, is to, you know, not just continue to pave what we currently have in terms of roadway. I think that we likely can't afford to continue to pave 6 lanes where there should be 2 anymore. The city of Port Alberni was built in a different time, and times have changed. And you know, our community is going to look different going forward. So that said, change is difficult, and when we are, you know, redoing streetscapes proactively and redoing streetscapes when the opportunities arise for, you know, where improvements need to happen, that will come with challenge. And when we can communicate with residents, that certainly can help alleviate some of the fears around that. So I would certainly encourage, you know, any members of that area who have concerns to reach out to the city, either to the engineering department or to council or to anyone at the city, to have a conversation, and probably some of those concerns would be alleviated. Thanks for that, Councillor Paulson. Any other comments? Okay. I wanted to ask on A, the request to replant a tree on Argyle. Do we have a policy? Do we have a policy around tree removals and when we replace them and when we do not replace them? Understanding that I know, you know, many trees were removed for an infrastructure project from Upper Argyle a few years ago, and they were replaced, but of course with you know, much younger trees. I know that we have talked about a tree policy, but I'm not sure if we've made progress on that yet. Rob, welcome.
And I'm sorry, I'm just going to add before Rob does, we are working on a tree policy. It is with staff right now. We do intend to bring it forward in very short order, but then I will let our engineers speak to when works transpire.
Thank you.
And I'll leave that discussion regarding the policy to Amy, our tree person, as well as Twyla. Related to this specific location is in our zoning bylaws, section 6.5, we actually talk about sight lines at intersections. And so for people with fences or hedges on their property line, to avoid putting trees and hedges in that zone where it can impinge on somebody walking out into a roadway or two cars coming together where there isn't a controlled stop. And in this particular location, that applies, where if we replanted that tree, it would become a sightline hazard for people. So that's why we haven't replanted that particular tree.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Okay. Okay, and I'm not going to ask a question on the water meter replacement program letter. Appreciate the letter from Jerry, but I do know that there's a report coming forward on that, so I don't think we have to have any additional conversation about it today.
I was going to ask you about that.
Okay. So moving on then from the correspondence for information, we will go to report from in camera. Twyla, did you want to give an overview here?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is just a report bringing for public consumption the CAO appointment. So just following the announcement to the former CAO that he would be retiring from his position, the city, effective December 31st, the city did engage the services of Leaders International, a professional executive search firm, to carry out and assist council in filling the vacancy. Over a number of months in the new year, council worked with Leaders International in carrying out that search. While a number of applicants were considered, the search did not result in a preferred candidate being hired. In light of that, council then moved forward with the engagement of the former CAO, who will be acting in an interim capacity effective April 12th, and he's expected to remain in the role until the end of this year.
Thank you very much. So appreciate that this is just a report for information. I do want to say on behalf of council that we are excited to have Tim rejoining us in this capacity, and thankful that we have him as an interim CAO moving forward. I do want to also just recognize Scott Smith, who has been our acting CAO this year. So for what has felt like a long period of time, Scott, having you in this role, we really appreciated the opportunity. And I know that the community is probably going to be very anxiously awaiting your return, full-time return to the Development Services Department, as that is a very busy space. So thank you very much, Scott, for all the work you've done in this role while you've been in it. Okay, we will move on to council reports. Are there any items that councillors would like to highlight from their reports? Okay, not seeing any specifically. I would like to highlight, of course, a few of us were away at AVICC last weekend. And I wanted to just update council that I was able to attend a bit of a last-minute meeting that was put together with Minister Osborne in her new role as Minister of Land, Water, etc. She has a long ministry name. We joked a bit that she's the new Flynn Rowe in terms of long ministries, but we were really grateful to have the opportunity to meet with her to talk about watershed protection specifically. So it was myself, the chair of the Comox Valley Regional District, mayors of Qualicum and Parksville, and several regional district directors as well, all of whom who have, for the most part, watersheds that are on private managed forest lands, and just some of the concerns and risks that come with that. It was a very productive meeting. Really appreciated the opportunity to share some of the concerns that Port Alberni has had in protecting our drinking water and making sure that it's sustainable going forward. When, of course, much of the control is outside of our realm of responsibility, being on private managed forest land. It was a great starting point. We definitely recognized, I think, that another meeting of those parties would be valuable moving forward. And it actually was Josie's first day as minister in that newly created ministry. So she said it was a great way to kick that off, but learned a lot from what some of the other mayors and chairs are doing in their communities. In the Cowichan Valley Regional District, they have a watershed working group that I'm going to be reaching out to their mayors and chairs to learn a little bit more about the structure of. I think there's some great examples that we could learn from. And yeah, so just wanted to update on that. More conversation to be had, but wanted council to be aware that we were able to have that meeting and bring the issues and concerns and kind of long-term protection of our watershed forward. Any other items councillors would like to highlight, either from reports or from ABICC?
I'll be doing a big ABICC.
I figured you would. Thank you. Then we will move on to new business. And we have one item, license to occupy, and I will pass this over to Councillor Haggard, and I'll recuse myself as there is a conflict with my husband's work.
Great, thank you. Could I get a report from our corporate officer regarding the license of occupation agreement between the City of Port Alberni and the Salvation Army? Just a summary of the agreement?
Yes, thank you. So council will recall that you entertained a late item at your last meeting, and that was a request to provide for a mobile shower facility, and that was through the Salvation Army. This agreement speaks to permitting that pop-up mobile shower facility. Very similar, the agreement has been structured to reflect the agreement that was entered into with the Grassroots Homelessness Society, which allowed for pop-up warming centers. So this agreement is basically replicating that agreement. The subject property where the shower would be able to be located is at 3509 4th Avenue. This is one of those same locations that council approved for the warming center. I will jump to Schedule A, which basically speaks to the specifics that the Salvation Army would have to adhere to when providing for that mobile facility. And it's essentially speaking to the exact location. It talks about the facility being available from 6 p.m. at night until 10 p.m. that same day. They would be permitted to go as early as 5 p.m. on the day that they're going to provide that service to set up, and that the license currently speaks to the operation of that shower up to a maximum of 4 days per week. We didn't get specific on the days. This is something that the Salvation Army is currently just demoing for the first time, so they're not quite sure what exact days they want to offer the facility, so we just kept it general. When the facility is open and for use, it will be staffed at all times. The property needs to be returned to its original state, and the shower facility would be removed from that site when the service had wrapped up for that day. And the agreement speaks to permitting the licensee to access the sanitation dump that's right in close proximity to that property, to release the gray and black matter, and then also to use the city's water to refill the mobile's reservoir.
Thank you very much, Twyla. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? Would someone like to make this motion to accept this agreement?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Motion made by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Kerbill. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Motion carried. Thank you.
Great job.
Can somebody call the mayor back in, please?
Here she comes.
How does she know?
Okay, thank you. Are there any other items of new business today? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure where to put this, but over the weekend received some photographs down of our lovely Harbor Quay. I was thrilled to see the cover off the clock tower, but pictures of trees that are probably past rejuvenating and a little bit of trash in Spirit Square. So I promised the person sending in the photographs that we would let Director Thorpe know that it's time for a bit of a cleanup down at Harbor Key. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We will ask staff to pass that along to Willa. And I will add as well, not to vote on today, but I would like to add as a notice of motion for next meeting, a notice of motion that council support Gord John's private members bill, and we will provide more information on it at the next meeting. Okay, but just want to formally add it to our next agenda. And we will move on now with question period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Would any members of the public like to come forward?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, and thank you to Scott, and for my misunderstanding regarding the process. Just to ask, I'm going to ask a question at the end of this, but I just want to sort of clarify. I did read the newspaper regarding the open house to the public, and a couple things were confusing to me, probably because it said those that feel directly affected by it, that live in the area, so I thought that's not me, so I won't come to that. Also, it was changes to what I believe were setbacks and different things regarding that, not the overall completion of the project, so that's misunderstanding on my part, so thank you if I misunderstood. And what I would like to ask is, regarding proposals that are presented before council and then the outcome, the final outcome, it looks like I've missed the mark on the process of that. And so my question would be to you, for clarification for myself and helping me to understand the process, who would I talk to within city or city council to clarify what the steps are for the beginning of that to the outcome, so that I'm not missing an opportunity or presenting at a wrong time. So thank you again, Scott, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I would say talk to Scott, and Scott, if not himself, will direct you, to someone to understand process within the planning department. And just want to say, really appreciate that question. It is so important that we hear from members of the public, but I think we often take for granted that members of the public don't always understand our processes. They are not common, to the average person who's not engaged every day in this world. So thank you. And we had talked at one point about making some videos or putting out information around even things as simple as when do you need a building permit, a few years ago, and how do you apply for a development permit and all of those types of things. So it's something we certainly could revisit. Thank you. Any other members of the public like to ask a question today? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move adjournments? So moved. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried.